For 24 hours in July 1947, the world believed it was true. The U.S. Army announced they had captured a flying saucer. Then, just as quickly, the story vanished, replaced by a ridiculous tale of a weather balloon. But what did they really find in the New Mexico desert? And why did it lead to the creation of Area 51?
It wasn't the lightning that woke him. Ranch foreman William Mac Brazel was used to the violent theatrics of a New Mexico thunderstorm. He'd seen the high, lonesome desert floor flash white under a sky splitting apart, heard thunder so loud it rattled the fillings in his teeth. No, what jolted him from his sleep in the pre-dawn hours of that July night in 1947 was a sound that had no place in nature. It was a thunderclap that didn't fade, a deafening, grinding roar that seemed to tear the very fabric of the storm, followed by a final, earth-shaking boom that was felt more than it was heard. He sat up in bed, the silence that followed somehow louder and more terrifying than the noise it had replaced. He told himself it was just an unusually violent clap of thunder, and eventually he fell back asleep. He was wrong. The world had just changed, and he was about to be the first man to find the wreckage. 2 days later, on a blistering Sunday morning, Brazel rode out with his neighbor's son to check on his sheep scattered by the storm. As they crested a low mesa, they saw it. Spread across a field 3/4 of a mile long and several hundred feet wide was a scene of utter, baffling devastation. It wasn't a crater, not a single point of impact, but a vast scar of debris, as if something had disintegrated in the air and been dragged across the desert floor. His first thought was a plane crash, but as he dismounted and walked into the field, that thought evaporated. The material was like nothing he had ever seen. There were pieces of a metallic foil-like substance, thin as wrapping paper from a cigarette pack, but impossibly strong. He could crumple it in his fist, and when he opened his hand, it would unfold itself perfectly smooth without a single crease. It was a metal that held no memory of being bent. There were also small, lightweight beams like balsa wood, but the color of pewter. He tried to cut one with his pocket knife, and the blade wouldn't even scratch it. Along the inner surfaces of these beams were strange, indecipherable characters. They weren't letters, not any alphabet he knew. They were geometric, almost hieroglyphic, colored in shades of violet and lavender, as if they were part of the material itself, not painted on. For hours, Brazel and the boy gathered armfuls of the strange wreckage, stashing it in an old shed. This was no weather balloon. Of that he was certain. It wasn't an airplane or a missile. It was something else, something utterly alien. And as he drove the long, dusty road into Roswell to tell the sheriff, Mac Brazel had no idea he was driving away from his quiet, simple life forever. He was about to hand the United States military the biggest secret in human history. The disc and the deception. Sheriff George Wilcox was a man who understood the predictable rhythms of life in Chaves County. Drunks, cattle disputes, the occasional domestic disturbance, that was his world. So when Mac Brazel stumbled into his office dropping a piece of the strange, self-healing foil on his desk, Wilcox knew he was leagues out of his depth. He picked up the phone and made a call to the only other authority in town that mattered, Roswell Air Army Field, home of the 509th Bombardment Group, the most elite military unit in the world, the men who had dropped the atomic bombs on Japan. The call went to Major Jesse Marcel, the base's intelligence officer. Marcel was a sharp, decorated officer who had flown missions in the Pacific. He'd seen everything, or so he thought. He drove out to the ranch with a counterintelligence agent, and the moment he saw the debris field, he knew his life, too, had changed. It was not anything from this earth, he would state decades later, his voice still filled with the conviction of that day. I've seen every kind of aircraft we have and the Russians have. This was not one of ours, and it was not one of theirs. Marcel spent the afternoon examining the bizarre materials. The memory foil astounded him. The I-beams with their cryptic purple symbols fascinated him. He loaded his staff car with as much of the debris as he could carry, and on the drive back to the base, made a stop at his own home. He woke up his young son, Jesse Jr., and spread the unearthly material on the kitchen floor. "You'll never see anything like this again," he told the sleepy boy. "Take a good look." It was a decision, born of pure awe, that he would come to regret. Back at the base, the commander, Colonel William Blanchard, was equally stunned. This was technology far beyond anything they possessed. The Cold War was in its infancy, and the immediate fear was that this was a new kind of Soviet surveillance craft, but the materials suggested something far more advanced. The decision was made to go public, to control the narrative before rumors could spin out of control. Colonel Blanchard dictated a press release to his public information officer, Walter Haut. On the afternoon of July 8, 1947, the teletype machines at radio stations and newspapers across the country clattered to life with a bombshell announcement. The Army Air Forces here today announced a flying disc has been found. The story exploded. It was picked up by the Associated Press and went global in minutes. For a few brief, electrifying hours, the world believed that the mystery of the flying saucers that had been sighted across America for weeks had been solved. The military had captured one. The phone lines at Roswell lit up. The Pentagon was screaming. The commanding general of the 8th Air Force in Fort Worth, Texas, Roger Ramey, was demanding answers. He ordered Marcel to load the debris on a B-29 and fly it immediately to his headquarters, and to bring the wreckage with him. When Major Marcel arrived at General Ramey's office in Fort Worth, he walked into an ambush. He laid out the strange, exotic materials he had collected from the desert floor. General Ramey and his chief of staff, Colonel Thomas Dubose, looked at it, then took Marcel into an adjoining map room. "Son, you're going to forget you ever saw this," Ramey told him, his voice low and firm. "This is not what we're going to tell the public." When they walked back out, the real debris was gone. In its place, strewn across the floor, was the tattered, pathetic wreckage of a standard weather balloon, complete with its tinfoil radar target. A waiting press photographer was ushered in. General Ramey knelt down, holding a piece of flimsy foil and rubber for the camera. He explained to the reporters that the excited personnel at Roswell had made a mistake. What they had found was nothing more than a common weather balloon. Major Marcel was ordered to pose for the photos, to kneel beside the fake wreckage and point to the flimsy material. The look on his face in those now famous photographs is one of utter humiliation and disbelief. He was a war hero, an intelligence officer, and he was being forced to participate in a lie, to be the public face of a ridiculous cover-up. The message was clear. The story is over. There is nothing to see here. Go back to your lives. The retraction was as swift as the initial announcement. The next day's headlines read, "General Ramey empties Roswell saucer." The world laughed, shook its head at the jumpy hayseeds in New Mexico, and moved on. The cover-up was a stunning success, but for the men involved, it was just the beginning. The real wreckage, along with something far more shocking, was already on a secret flight to Wright Field in Ohio, the heart of the Air Force's technological research. And back in Roswell, a quiet, sinister cleanup was underway. Mac Brazel was taken into military custody for a week. He was interrogated, intimidated, and sworn to secrecy, threatened with prison if he ever spoke the full truth again. When he emerged, he was a changed man. He told the local paper a different story, the official story, about finding a weather balloon. His friends said the life had been scared out of his eyes. Men in dark suits, agents from Washington, visited every witness, from the sheriff to the local radio station manager, confiscating every last scrap of the real debris that had been collected. They were erasing the incident from history, burying it under the weight of official denial and public ridicule. The lie had been told. Now, the secret had to be kept. And to keep a secret this big, they would need a very special place. A place that didn't exist.
Project Grudge and the birth of a black site. While the world was being told about a weather balloon, a far more complex operation was unfolding in the shadows.
The debris Marcel had collected was only part of the story. Another B-29, flying out of Sandia Base in Albuquerque, had been dispatched to a second crash site, miles from Brazel's field. This was the main body of the craft and its occupants. The reports that filtered up to the highest levels of President Truman's administration were terrifying. A small disc-shaped craft had been recovered, largely intact, and with it several small humanoid bodies, not human, with large heads, slender torsos, and big, dark eyes. The biological material was just as alien as the memory foil. The implications were world-shattering. The existence of intelligent, non-human life was now a state secret. But the more immediate concern was the technology. The crashed vehicle represented a technological leap so profound it could destabilize the entire planet. In the hands of the Soviets, it would be a checkmate in the Cold War. In American hands, it could guarantee supremacy for a century. A top-secret committee, codenamed Majestic 12, or MJ-12, was allegedly formed, comprised of the nation's top scientists, military leaders, and intelligence officials. Their mandate was simple: analyze the technology, replicate it, and keep it an absolute secret from the public and from America's enemies. The initial work at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio proved problematic. It was too populated, too accessible. They needed a place that was off the map, a location where they could test exotic technologies without attracting attention. They needed a black hole on American soil. The search began. They needed a place with a pre-existing runway, absolute remoteness, and terrible weather to deter curiosity. They found it in the vast, empty expanse of the Nevada desert, a dry lake bed called Groom Lake, adjacent to a new nuclear testing range. It was perfect. It was a place you could only get to on purpose, and the government already owned all the land for hundreds of miles in every direction. In 1955, under the cover of creating a facility for the development of the new U-2 spy plane, the CIA and the Air Force built the most secret military base in the world. On all official maps, it didn't exist. Pilots were ordered to fly around the airspace, designated as Area 51 on the grid of the Nevada test site. It had other names: Dreamland, Paradise Ranch, but its function was singular. It was to become the new home for the Roswell wreckage and the epicenter of a technological revolution fueled by reverse engineering. A new highly classified project was born. Let's call it Project Looking Glass. The brightest minds from Lockheed, MIT, and Caltech were recruited, often without being told the full truth. They were brought to the desert, sworn to secrecy oaths that followed them to the grave, and shown things that defied belief. They were shown the memory foil and tasked with creating radar-absorbent materials. They were shown the strange fiber optic-like filaments and told to develop new forms of data transmission. They were given pieces of the craft's power source, a stable, powerful element that seemed to warp gravity, and tasked with understanding a new kind of physics. The work was slow and often dangerous, but the breakthroughs were monumental. The transistor, which had been invented in Bell Labs shortly after the Roswell crash, was rapidly developed, its solid-state principles mirroring the alien circuitry. The first integrated circuits, the foundation of all modern electronics, were born from the effort to replicate the craft's guidance system. The unique aerodynamic shape of the disk influenced the design of new radical aircraft. While the public saw a gradual logical progression of technology, inside Area 51, they were working from the answer key. The U-2 spy plane, which could fly at an astonishing 70,000 feet, was one of the first public byproducts of the program. Its development was so secret and its performance so unprecedented that when commercial airline pilots began reporting strange high-altitude silver disks over the desert, The Air Force had to invent cover stories about atmospheric phenomena. They were, in effect, using UFO sightings to cover up their own secret aircraft, which were themselves based on a real UFO. The irony was lost on no one inside the project. The Blackbirds and the Whistleblowers. The golden age of Area 51 was the 1960s. The knowledge gleaned from Project Looking Glass fueled the creation of the most advanced aircraft ever built. The A-12 Oxcart and its more famous successor, the SR-71 Blackbird, were direct descendants of the Roswell technology. They were made of titanium alloys designed to withstand incredible heat and stress. Their shape was a marvel of stealth engineering, designed to be almost invisible to radar, a concept born from the non-reflective, seamless hull of the disk. The Blackbird could fly at over Mach 3, faster than a rifle bullet, on the very edge of space. It was a piece of science fiction made real. A black triangle that haunted the skies, its existence a closely guarded secret for years. Inside the underground hangars of Groom Lake, the work continued. Generations of scientists and engineers spent their entire careers there, living in a secret world, unable to tell their families what they did. They were pushing the boundaries of science, but they were also keepers of a profound and isolating truth. For decades, the secret held. The weather balloon story, despite the persistent testimony of Jesse Marcel and others, remained the official line. Area 51 was just a myth, a figment of the imagination for conspiracy theorists. Then, in 1989, the wall of secrecy began to crack. A man named Bob Lazar went public on a Las Vegas television station with an incredible story. He claimed to have been a physicist hired to work at a secret facility south of Groom Lake, known as S4. His job, he said, was to reverse engineer the propulsion system of one of 9 captured alien saucers held by the government. Lazar described the craft in astonishing detail. He talked about the gravity amplifiers, powered by a stable isotope of an undiscovered element, element 115. He described the interior of the craft, the small seats, the seamless construction. His story was electrifying. He provided details about the base's location, its security procedures, and the science he was working on. The government responded with its usual tactic, denial and ridicule. They erased his records. They claimed he never worked for them, that he was a fraud. But Lazar's story resonated. It matched too many of the rumors that had been swirling for years. He put Area 51 on the map, transforming it from a whispered myth to a global phenomenon. Tourists, dubbed pilgrims, flocked to the barren highways bordering the base, hoping to catch a glimpse of a secret test flight or an otherworldly craft. The government was eventually forced to acknowledge the existence of the base in 2013, declassifying documents that confirmed it as a test site for the U-2 spy plane and other secret aircraft, but they admitted no more. The core of the secret, the reason for the base's very creation, remained locked away. Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer who was there at the beginning, never wavered from his story. He went to his grave in 1986, insisting that what he held in his hands in 1947 was not of this world. His son, Jesse Jr., who saw the debris on the kitchen floor, became a respected doctor and flight surgeon, and he too maintained the truth of his father's account until his own death. Today, Area 51 still operates. The occasional strange lights are still seen in the Nevada sky. The base remains a black box, a place where our world intersects with another. What began with a strange grinding roar in a New Mexico thunderstorm became the most protected and profound secret of the modern age. It fueled a technological revolution that shaped the world we live in, from the smartphone in your pocket to the stealth bombers that patrol our skies. The public was told a simple lie to cover a complex truth. The weather balloon was just the first brick in a wall of secrecy so high and so vast, it has cast a shadow over our entire world. And somewhere, deep beneath the desert floor, in a place that officially doesn't exist, the rest of the story is still waiting to be told.